I think we talked a lot before your short came out, before you wrote it, about like, well, what do we have to offer the genre? Because analog horror is a very malleable genre, and I guess I'd like to kind of hear you talk about like kind of that process and what informed your take on like what was part of your point of view, what was part of your or skill set as well, and kind of like what was your process for figuring out like how can I approach this genre? What do I have to offer analog horror?
Yeah, that's a really good question because there's a lot of great analog horror, and I feel like every week or month or so, I see a new one get highlighted by certain channels that do cover it. Like Night Mind's a great channel who covers it, and Nexpo is another one who occasionally does. And I guess just to me, I've always been interested and I've always wanted to try it, but I didn't know exactly what spin I wanted to do. I definitely wanted to stay away from more FNAF inspired pieces. Not that they're bad, but I think mascot horror and like analog horror in the analog horror genre even um is pretty it makes up a decent portion of it. And what really happened, I think, is years ago when I first saw Monument Mythos doing this kind of alternate history analog horror, it kind of zapped me because that's a genre I've loved for a very long time. And I was like, yeah, I want to do something like that. Um, so certain pieces kind of fell into place where like I started creating this original like world that I don't even wouldn't even call like alternate history. It's just like an alternate world that happens to have humans on it. Um, and I kind of realized this would be a good setting for this analog horror, idea that I have. Um, and then just over the course of writing it and kind of working with Joe, who helped edit and make a few of the assets, I was able to release it. I'm really happy because it's nice to put something from your mind to the screen.
So I guess I'm curious about like, just kind of comparing this because to me this is, different from other pieces of analog horror that I've seen. It's an in-universe piece of media, but I guess I'd be interested in kind of hear you compare like, now with your peers that are these other analog horror creators, kind of where do you see like what separates it from something like the Monument Mythos, and what is the strengths of the Pale Incident Report kind of as compared to some of these other analog horror pieces?
Yeah, I guess to answer that latter question, I think the strength is the writing because I think something that Monument Mythos has, not just in its writing and its concepts, but visually is just really, I think, stunning. And the sound design, even too, and it's genuinely just so unsettling. And so, I mean, there are moments where it's just playing music and showing you these visuals that the creator, uh, he goes by Mr. Manicore now, is I'm just I was captivated by it, but I'm not really super good with graphic design so much. It's something I want to get better at and improve on as the series goes on. But I think the writing is what I wanted to do. I wanted to present this like really unique concept that I hoped would stand out in the genre. And I think by setting it not just in like an alternate world, which I think a lot of analog horrors can kind of claim, right? Like we obviously do not live in the Mandela catalog universe, um, you know, but it's even further separated. But hopefully, it's still drawing on those primal fears. Um, and I guess to answer the first part of your question, I hope I'm not missing anything. But yeah, like Monument Mythos was a big piece of the puzzle that fell in because I guess my process for writing is I see something that kind of inspires me and I may not initially write it down, but I toy around with it in my head, and then I see other media, uh, other art that I can, I look at and view, and I kind of start to, it sounds maybe like plagiarism, but I start kind of taking pieces. I'm like, and then I kind of try to start with a fresh slate, So I think Monument Mythos was the big catalyst, but there was a lot of other things. Like I said, I think looking back at, um, like I'm a big fan of, the Shatter over Innsmouth story from Lovecraft, and so there were just all these things. Um, and I think even like the Pale specifically, like a big inspiration for that is the in the game Disco Elysium also has its own Pale, which works very similarly. And initially, the Pale was kind of just a one for one from that world. And as I kind of wrote about it, I was like, well, I have to make it different. I have to kind of extrapolate and make it my own thing. I really liked the name. I didn't want to change the name. And I really was kind of inspired also the pale, like beyond the pale, that phrase, and this kind of like beyond the human world and into this sort of fey and fairy and you know uh non-material world. Like that really interested me, and so I started looking at kind of mythology and like all these things. And like I said, I don't want to ramble too much or spoil too much, but I think it's kind of evolved into its own thing, and I'm really excited about exploring it in the further Pale Incident reports.